When we think of mobile navigation, we're often imagining the bottom tabs layout. Very rare to see on websites, but a super common feature on mobile apps. In this video, we will see how to create a bottom tabs layout, how to add nested navigators within your bottom tabs, and what the navigation patterns and history look like. Say we have 3 screens and a layout file. In order to show these as bottom tabs, the layout file needs to return a tabs navigator. Let's add some icons to these so it's easy to envision how they would look like as bottom tabs. Nesting navigators is extremely common for mobile layouts. So a tab may be a single screen, but it could also be a navigator. Here we convert the second tab to return a stack navigator with 2 screens, which is how we can navigate to a screen in a stack navigator that's inside a tabs navigator. And this is why the navigation history on mobile takes on more of a tree structure. We start once more with our single layout that returns a stack navigator and a single screen. Let's duplicate this screen 3 times. So we would also have a second, a third, and a fourth screen. Right now, these screens are using a stack navigator. So of course we're only seeing the index screen, unless we add a button to link to any of the others. To change this to a bottom tabs layout, all we need to do is change the navigator returned from a layout file from stack to tabs. Now, after refreshing the app, we're greeted with the bottom tabs layout we've all come to expect from mobile apps. All the screens in our app folder get rendered as tabs. This happens even without us defining them in this tabs component. But we do want to list them here in order to configure the order, as well as pass in other screen options. So let's add each of our tabs in order. We still have placeholder icons here for now, but we can easily swap them out with screen options. These can be any React Native components really, but generally we use icons. Let's install Expo vector icons, and now we can easily use any of the icons from this list. I found some numeric material icons, so I think I'll stick with these. So I'll import the icon set, and under options, we have an object, and we can pass in a tab bar icon, which is a function returning the icon. And we can see that it's already shown up here. Let me quickly add it to the other screens as well. Now the icons have been updated, but you'll notice that they no longer change color when we change tabs. So we would expect the inactive icons to be gray and the active icons to be blue. Well, the tab bar icon actually receives props, which tells it whether the tab is focused, what color it should be, and also the size. And conveniently for us, we can pass the color and the size straight through to the icon. And now all of the tab icons are highlighted as expected. This way of defining a color is especially convenient because we can set these colors at the tab level. So the tabs component itself receives screen options, and one of the options we can pass in is the tab bar active tint color, for example teal, which will change the active tint color for all the tabs. There's a bunch of different ways we can configure the tab bar. For example, the tab bar label by default will be the name of the screen. If we give the screen a title, then by default this title will also be used as the label. Or we can pass the tab bar label in separately. Or indeed, we can hide the labels entirely. I leave the title and tab bar label different for the home screen, and I'll use the screen title for the rest. I won't go through all the options, but as ever, you can control space to see the TypeScript types. One thing worth knowing is that if you pass in the href in your options as null, this will actually hide the screen from the tab bar. Something else quite handy that's built in is badges. So for example, if you pass in a value for the tab bar badge, this will get rendered on the tab. You can of course customize the tab bar badge style. For example, I'll make mine a little bit of a less intense red. Let's now add a stack navigator on the second page so we could navigate within this tab. So right now we have tabs for index, second, third, and fourth. And what we want to do is turn the second tab into a stack. So that includes 3 screens. The index screen, so the current second screen, nested, and also nested. So to do this, let's create a folder called second in our app folder. Move the second page in there and rename it to index. Let's duplicate this index file twice to create the other 2 screens. Now, when I refresh my app, you'll notice that all of these 3 screens actually get added to the bottom tabs. And the reason for it is that we don't have a navigator here, we don't have a layout file. So just adding screens into a folder does not govern the layout at all. That is the role of the layout files. So what's happening is for each of these screens, we look for the closest layout file. There isn't one in second, so we look one folder up. We find the layout file that's the root layout file, and this returns a tabs navigator, which is saying that all of the screens that are governed by this navigator should be rendered as bottom tabs. So to actually render these as a stack, we want to create a layout file in our second folder. And we'll create a default export which returns a stack navigator. So now when I refresh the app, the second tab is in the right place again. Let's add a button to the second index screen that pushes onto the second nested screen, and from the nested screen to the also nested screen, just so we can navigate between all 3. And now in our second tab, we can navigate onto the nested screens. Now, I'm sure you've noticed that we now have 2 headers here on the screen. And while it's kind of helpful for us to understand where we are navigation-wise, it's not particularly nice for the user. So the top one is coming from the tabs navigator, and the bottom one is coming from the stack navigator. So we want to hide one of them, but which one? The usual thing to do is to hide the outer header, so the header could easily still change when we navigate within the stack. To do this, we'll go to the root layout file, and on the second tab screen options, we set the header shown to be false. This will instantly hide the additional header. And of course, we can configure the titles of each of the screens in the layout file that defines the stack. Notice that here the name of the screen is relative to this layout file. What if we also wanted to add a stack navigator in the Home tab? Well, our Home tab is rendering the index route, and the index route is special. When you run the sitemap, the index route is this one, and it is the screen that opens first when your app is launched. So the problem we have is that if we create any folder to put our index screen in, even if we link to it correctly in our tabs layout, when we refresh the app, we will get this not found page. That's because on initial launch, Router is trying to render this index route, and indeed, there isn't one. You can also see this easily with the CLI command. But this is where the grouping folders come in. So when I add parentheses around the home folder, and in this case I actually also had to restart the bundler and refresh the app, our index page is rendering again. We can also see it here in the sitemap. Now all we have left to do is duplicate the index screen to create another screen for the stack, add a button from the index screen to the nested screen, add a layout to the home folder that returns a Stack Navigator, and in the root layout ensure that we are targeting the home folder. And now when we refresh the app, our index screen has a nested navigator. Same as with the second screen, we can hide this header with header shown false and give the nested screens nicer names in the home layout. When it comes to navigating within the tabs, we can flick between them when we press the tab bar buttons. The index screen will always be the first one rendered. The only way to change this is with a redirect. You don't have to have the index screen as the first tab. For example, I can move it to be the third tab. So when I reload, the third tab is opened, which is now the index screen. Let me put that back the way it was. And for the nested screens in the second tab, let me give them a pink and a yellow background, just so we could more easily differentiate between them. Now on the second tab, if I go to the nested screen and then the deeply nested screen, and then I press on the tab button, it actually resets to the first screen. And this is built-in behavior for the tab bar. Now, if I navigate back to the deeply nested screen and navigate away from the second tab and back again, you'll see that the Stack Navigator state was persisted. And if we tap on the second tab again, it will reset to the first screen. You can change this behavior in the Tabs Navigator. So under the second screen, let's set pop to top on blur to true. Now when we go to the nested screen, navigate away and back again, then we are reset to the index screen. I don't really like that I can see the animation when I go back to the screen, so I kind of want to disable this animation, but only for this scenario. So what I can do is in the layout file for the second tab, let's read the current path name using the use path name hook. And I'll go to the second screen, nested screen, deeply nested screen, third screen, and then back to second screen. So you can see this prints out the path name that we're currently on. And I'll make the animation conditional. So I'll say that if the path name starts with second, so we're on a second tab, then we'll show the default animation and then otherwise none. So now when I navigate within the stack, I'm getting the nice back and forward animations. But then if I navigate away and back again, then the screen is reset without an animation. Another interesting thing is how the tab's history works. So let's add a back button on the index screen. So we'll import router from use router and add a button that calls router back. And let's just add this back button to all 4 of our main screens. When we call back on the index screen, we actually get this console.error telling us that it can't be handled. And as the error says, it is a development only warning. Of course, we can also check whether going back is possible and only render the back button if so. Now let's navigate from the index screen to second, to third, to fourth, and now press the back button. What do you think this is going to do? It will in fact by default go back to the index screen, which might not be what you're expecting if you're thinking in stacks. This is in fact the default back behavior for bottom tabs navigators. So by default, we return to the first screen defined in the navigator, which for us was the index screen. It does mean that if I reorder my tabs now so that the second screen is listed first, and then I go to third, fourth, and then press back, it does in fact open the second screen. initial route option is usually not applicable, so for your sanity, I would ignore this option. If you want your tab history to be more like a stack, then you could use order. So on our Tab Navigator, let's set the back behavior to order. And now when I refresh and I go from index to second to third to fourth, and then call back, we actually go back to third, then back to second, and then back to index. In this video, we've learned all about the bottom tabs navigator, how to configure tab icons, nest navigators, and manage navigation history. The code from this video is available in the description. See you next time!